So, in continuing with our How to Defend Against the Mongols series by Kings and Generals, I'm going to be now looking at the Mamluks in the Middle East for this part, which is going to be very interesting and seeing how they dealt and defended against the Mongols. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the narrative keeps changing and what new historical characters we'll be learning about. So, yeah, the link to this video is down in the description down below. It's always the first link. And if you enjoy my channel and want to help me out, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help my small but humble channel grow, and I'd appreciate it a lot. With that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let's watch and learn about how the Mamluks and the Middle East defended against the Mongols.
The eastern limit of the Mongol expansion was decided by Ain Jalut. The famous battle and the campaign surrounding it provided the Mamluk Sultan Baybars with a plethora of lessons he would employ against the Mongols. Baybars and many of the Mamluks were Kipchaks, Turkic nomads who lived in the Great Grass Steppe, which stretches from Ukraine through Kazakhstan. When the Mongols conquered those steppes in the 1230s, thousands of Kipchaks were displaced and sold abroad. Baybars and other boys like him were purchased by the Ayyubids of Egypt, descendants of the mighty Saladin. They were converted to Islam and trained to become fearsome soldiers on foot and horseback, equipped with the finest arms, armors, and horses. Skilled with bow and mace, these slave soldiers, or Mamluks, became some of the greatest horseback warriors of the age. When the French king Louis IX and his army invaded Egypt on the Seventh Crusade, at the Battle of Mansoura in 1250, 600 knights charged against the Mamluks. Only a handful of knights escaped alive. In the ensuing days, the Mamluks not only defeated the Crusader army and captured Louis IX, but murdered the last Ayyubid Sultan, beginning a long period of fighting between Mamluk factions for control of Cairo. Baybars and his own Mamluk regiments were forced to flee to the Ayyubids of Syria. There, Baybars urged the Ayyubid ruler, Al-Nasir Yusuf, to rally his forces against the approaching Mongol prince Hulagu. Al-Nasir chose instead to trust in the walls of Damascus and Aleppo. Baybars, who always had a clear head, knew the great army of Hulagu, which had taken Baghdad, would find no trouble picking off poorly led Ayyubid defenders. Thus, Baybars abandoned the Ayyubids and made peace with his rival Qutuz, now the Sultan of Egypt. Al-Nasir shortly after abandoned his cities, and Syria swiftly fell to the Mongols in the spring of 1260. After that, there was no Islamic power in the region to stand against the Mongols, other than Cairo itself. Believing the Mamluks too disunited and weak, and not desiring to cross the desert in the heat of summer, Hulagu withdrew with most of his army to the cooler pastures of Azerbaijan. He sent letters to the Mamluks demanding their submission, and made it apparent that he would return in the autumn. Hulagu left his commander, Ket Buka, to consolidate Syria and Palestine, establishing a new government under a puppet Ayyubid prince named Al-Ashraf Musa. Contrary to some claims, Ket Buka was not in the midst of preparing to march on Egypt. He separated his forces into various local pastures to rest for the summer. Baybars and Qutuz could not let this opportunity slide. The emirs were terrified of the Mongols and believed them invincible. With difficulty, Qutuz and Baybars assembled a force commonly estimated at 10,000 Mamluks and a few thousand refugee soldiers who had fled the disintegration of Al-Nasir Yusuf's realm, including Turkmen, Kurds, and Bedouin. The march was daring, and several times Baybars and Qutuz needed to rally the emirs into advancing. They caught Ket Buka Noyan off guard, who had to quickly collect his forces from across the region. A corps of Mongols with Georgian, Armenian, and local forces, with a large Syrian contingent under Al-Ashraf Musa, the prince the Mongols made titular head of Syria. Its exact size is uncertain, but likely similar to the Mamluk army. The two armies met in early September 1260 at Ain Jalut. It was ground well suited for cavalry, the backbone of both armies. Fighting began with skirmishing. Baybars led the Mamluk vanguard, a day's ride ahead of Qutuz, and was forced to fall back after the first day. On the 3rd of September, the full Mamluk army arrived and formed up. Different medieval sources emphasize different aspects. Mamluk accounts stress the early arrival of the Mongols, while the Ilkhanid sources describe a Mamluk ambush. Uniformly, they depict a hard-fought battle, with the Mongols pushing back the Mamluks and requiring Qutuz to reform his army twice lest it broke. 3 factors led to the ultimate Mamluk victory that day. While it's sometimes claimed the Mamluks defeated the Mongols through superior numbers or with gunpowder, neither seems borne out. Notices of these weapons at Ain Jalut come from later military treatises, which aim to glorify these weapons. Instead, Qutuz and Baybars' leadership preventing a Mamluk rout was key. But also commonly overlooked was the defection of Al-Ashraf Musa, an Ayyubid prince allied to the Mongols and stationed on their left flank. Either fearing the outcome of the battle or in agreement with the Mamluks, Al-Ashraf and his forces fled the field, allowing the Mongol army to be enveloped. And hence the third factor for the Mamluk victory was their superior armor, weapons and training for extended close-quarter combat. Thus, with some difficulty, the Mamluks cut down the Mongols and killed Ketbuka. Qutuz and Baybars pushed the Mongols to the border and set about gaining the submission of regional princes, rewarding those like Al-Ashraf Musa or punishing those who had allied with the Mongols, while appointing a new governor for Syria. Qutuz was not long to enjoy his victory. Baybars assassinated him.
Yeah, we've covered this actually. I forgot what was the battle of Ain Jalut. But we actually have covered that from History March, and I believe another video. I can't remember at the moment, but yeah, we have covered this. So I'm no stranger to the story of Baybars and Qutuz. So yeah, again, this is like I mentioned last video. Kings in General seems to, like, at first I thought this series was gonna be more broad in a sense. Like, how did all Eastern Europe feel, or like, you know, looking at like specific as many areas as we could. But instead, he takes a person who happens to be from that region and kind of follows them. Like, again, like, I find that really an interesting narrative thing. It's almost like a personal account of, I guess, you know, how I guess a person who happens to be around there is dealing with, you know, the Mongols. I mean, I'm not sure that's gonna change anytime, but so far that seems to be kind of the trend I'm starting to pick up, which I really like. I do really like this. And again, the Mamluks, man, it's easy to forget just how powerful the Mamluks were in Egypt in general. And even near the end of the Ottoman Empire's time, Egypt managed to become powerful again and almost threatened the empire that they were a vassal of. So, again, Egypt, man, such a rich history and a powerful region that it's really cool to see Mamluk Egypt when it was, you know, younger and still more powerful, you know?
Revenge for Qutuz's murders of Baybars' allies. According to Baybars' chancellor and favoured biographer, Ibn Abd al-Zahir, Baybars' own sword, rightly guided by Allah, struck down Qutuz. Baybars was enthroned as sultan and set about consolidating power. Ain Jalut hadn't broken Mongol military power. Baybars had gambled everything he had in order to defeat what was essentially a garrison, not the full Mongol army. He knew the Mongols would seek revenge in greater numbers. At the end of 1260, another small Mongol army attacked Syria, which was defeated handily at Homs in December, a much-needed boost to confirm the outcome of Ain Jalut. From his own experience and reports of other Mongol conquests, Baybars built his defense. Several factors were seen as key to the Mongols' victories. A disunited defense and too much trust in city walls gave the Mongols freedom of movement and local superiority of force. Detailed information networks were needed to track and prepare for Mongol advances. Diplomatically, the Mamluks needed friends and allies to relieve some of the pressure, while also maintaining their own internal lines of communication. In effect, to prevent the situation al-Nasir Yusuf had experienced. The Mamluks had to play to their strengths, particularly their strong core of heavy horsemen and the limited routes of advance, and deny the Mongols their own advantages, their mobility and numbers. Baybars was going to design his entire kingdom to counter Mongol invasions.
Again, Baybars has a head on his shoulders. He has achieved success already against the Mongols, and you're just seeing him use his intelligence to great effect, you know? And again, reorganizing your kingdom just to defend against the Mongols, who at this point in history, arguably the most powerful empire in the world, is very smart, I think. You know? And a good move. And again, some of his ideas, such as gaining allies, maximizing his strength with his cavalry and negating the mobility of the Mongols. As we've seen, the Mongols' some of their greatest losses were due to them not being able to maneuver as freely or as openly, so that would require him to take much more, initiative. And I think that's great that he's starting to see all this and starting to try to find ways to, negate that.
Was also extremely fortunate. When Hulagur learned of the death of his brother, Grand Khan Mungke, he began to annex territories in Iran and the Caucasus that his northern cousins considered theirs, the soon-to-emerge Golden Horde. Their tax collectors had been stationed throughout these lands, and after Mungke's death, Hulagur ousted them for himself. The ruler of the northern branch of the Mongols, Berke, was a Muslim who already disliked Hulagur for his murder of the Caliph. The annexation of lands he considered his own, coupled with the mysterious deaths of some of Berke's kinsmen in Hulagur's army, and without a great Khan to mediate between them, led to war breaking out between the two princes in 1262. Hulagur spent the remainder of his life at war with Berke of the Golden Horde, and when he died in 1265, his son Abaka took up the throne and continued the fighting. This provided Baybars valuable years to nurture his strength without any significant Mongol attacks.
Yeah, the fracture of the Mongol Empire definitely was a big sigh of relief. At least compared to the united Mongol Empire that it once was for many people, right? And again, a big sigh of relief for Baybars, no doubt.
Baybars' first steps were securing the internal situation. Cities and principalities from Jordan through to Syria were subdued through force or treaty, while he incorporated the Bedouin Arabs of Syria into the defense, preventing them from allying with the Mongols. The governor of Syria, appointed by Qutuz, rebelled and declared himself Sultan, forcing Baybars to lead a campaign there to crush him and further consolidate his hold there. Baybars forced most of the Crusader settlements to accept treaties that protected his routes and allowed Baybars to reinforce Syria with soldiers and food supplies to overcome famine. The Crusader states were generally a minor annoyance, to fall at the Mamluks' leisure. Antioch fell to Baybars in 1268, Crac de Chevalier in 1271, and a slew of other Crusader sites by the end of his life. Given his lack of royal background and shaky claim to legitimacy, Baybars needed to reinforce his position in Cairo. To this end, he found a distant relation to the last Abbasid Caliph and quickly had him declared as a new Caliph in 1261. Inexplicably,
Meet Jim Mon.
He declared an attack on Baghdad with his new Caliph, marched as far as Damascus with him, and then sent the Caliph out with only some 400 men into Mongol lands. The result was the second Caliph was killed on Hulagur's order. What exactly Baybars hoped to achieve here confused even people at the time, and despite efforts to justify it, it seems Baybars simply made a rare misstep.
Okay, I was thinking that was weird if that was intentional. Trying to think okay, what chess move is he playing? What is the big brain maneuver here? It's yeah.
But generally, Baybars was more effective. He focused strongly on control of information. With spies in the Ilkhanate, he wanted to know if a Mongol army was moving before even the Mongols knew it. His spies are alleged to have spread misinformation to destabilize the Ilkhanate at times. It was important to the Sultan to know immediately about Mongol movements and other news, and for this he established the Berit. Perhaps inspired by the Mongols' Yam postal system, this was a system of relay stations for messages to travel quickly right into the Sultan's hands. This was supported by signal towers, permanently manned with bonfires and smoke signals, as well as messenger pigeons, improved roads and bridges. At its height, a rider could travel from Egypt to Damascus in 3 days.
Wow.
He also...
Yeah, it's the efficiency, and that's good. He's taking some aspects that work so well for his enemy, and is incorporating them into his own, system, which is just very smart to do. If something is working really great for one of the largest and greatest empires in the world, then why not just start taking it, and seeing what you can do with it? That's smart. Again, like, a lot of war can be won through just information and great data alone, So again, like, Baybars is a very intelligent and effective guy. Like, really what Egypt needed, especially in this time.
refocus the fortifications of the region. When taking a Frankish or rebel city or castle, Baybars had its fortifications destroyed, while border fortresses, primarily along the Euphrates frontier with the Ilkhanate, like Al-Bira and Al-Rabba, were strengthened. Permanently garrisoned, these forts survived numerous failed Mongol assaults. There was also a strict system in place should the Mongols pass the border forts. As stated, Baybars wanted to prevent isolated garrisons from being picked off one by the Mongols, as had happened to the Khwarezmian Empire. Baybars' order was for garrisons to retreat to an agreed point, where they would mass up and face the Mongols in a unified body, or await the arrival of the Sultan and the main army. This strategy was employed in every major Mongol attack on Syria over the decades, and proved a most effective defensive measure. Baybars also made it customary to advance with his forces as soon as the news came of a Mongol attack. This generally served to frighten off smaller Mongol raiding parties, while also reminding the Syrian population that the Sultan would be there immediately to protect them or to punish defectors.
It's that vigilance he has that is so effective, that he's the one that he's always on the top of his game, always on guard, and you have to be with the Mongols. So again, like, he's essentially seized that initiative and devoted himself and his, kingdom to essentially constant vigilance, which is good. Overall, yeah, like I said, it's hard not to be impressed by Baybars.
And when smaller Mongol parties withdrew, Baybars could then raid over the border, particularly against the Ilkhan's allies in Armenian Cilicia. Baybars also improved the army, especially the royal Mamluks, whose ranks he expanded and rewards heaped upon them, but also the Halka, the non-Mamluk lower status army. These were free men, native Egyptians, Kurds, Turkic auxiliaries, or the sons of Mamluks, who grew to dominate this body over the 14th century, and fill roles the prouder Mamluks refused to. The Mamluk garrisons in Cairo, particularly of the Berea, Mamluks to whom Baybars belonged, were reinforced, with hippodromes built in the city to train them, which also served to give entertainment to the population, while also reminding them of the Sultan's power. But Baybars also had to expand the Mamluk regiments, and for this he needed steady access to Turkic slaves from the steppe. For this, Baybars made treaties and encouraged good ties with the Genoese and the newly restored Byzantine Empire under Michael VIII.
It's always the Genoese that keeps popping up in these videos. Yeah, the Genoese and Venice had so much influence. They're always, like, a lot in like the medieval era we keep covering, they keep popping up, making allies with literally everyone. They were like just so, like, influential.
The Genoese ferried the Kipchaks on their ships, or sold them from the Crimean ports, and the Byzantines kept the Bosphorus open for their passage. But most importantly, Baybars needed the cooperation of the Mongols in the Golden Horde to allow this trade in the first place, or to stop them from harassing the Byzantines. This brings us to the alliance between Berke and Baybars. Upon learning of the war between the Golden Horde and Hulagur in 1262, Baybars sent a letter to Burqa Khan through an Alan merchant. It stressed the Islam of both men and encouraged Burqa's war against the Ilkhanate, but with no response from Burqa. A more fruitful opportunity came later that year, with a host of Mongol refugees. They were troops originally from the Golden Horde, who had been provided to Hulagur for the campaign against the Nizari Ismailis at Baghdad, but were betrayed and attacked by Hulagur at the beginning of hostilities. Some fled to Afghanistan under their commander, some to the Golden Horde, and the rest to Egypt. Baybars quickly jumped on the opportunity. He welcomed them to Cairo with a glowing reception and made a great show of how well he treated these Mongols. Their leaders were made emirs, and the rest were incorporated into the Mamluk army. These were the first of the Wafidiyya, the Mongols who fought for the Mamluks. They were far
another great smart move from Baybars, incorporating your enemies, using great diplomacy to win, new allies. Again, man, Baybars, dude, I'm very impressed by him and getting this in-depth look at his reign. This is a great reign, and his policies and changes he's implementing, also great. Like, really an all-around great leader.
From the last. Periodically, other Mongol refugees fleeing turmoil in the Ilkhanate, captured by the Mamluks after a victory, or sold as slaves during Mongol civil wars, ended up in Mamluk Egypt and incorporated into the army and elite. In time, some became the most powerful men in the Mamluk state. One, named ironically Ket Bukha, even became sultan in the 1290s.
Oh, wow.
The longest reigning Mamluk sultan, An-Nasir Muhammad, had a Mongolian mother, and Baybars himself took 3 Wafidiyya women as wives.
Wow, now that's interesting.
They gave Baybars deeper knowledge of the Mongol army. In addition to his spies within the Ilkhanate, Baybars was likely among the most well-informed individuals on the Mongol military that there ever was, allowing him to further finesse his strategies. On the initial welcoming of Mongols into Egypt in late 1262, Baybars installed a new caliph, then sent another letter to Burqa Khan, telling him of how he had so kindly treated Burqa's soldiers. He urged Burqa to take up jihad against Hulagur, and this time Burqa responded kindly, kicking off a diplomatic relationship that would last another 2 centuries.
Again, this man's use of diplomacy, everything he's doing is like amazing. He is playing chess and really thriving against his enemy, who at one point, was such a huge threat. And his victories against the Mongols and using Mongols to battle and man, it's just, it really is amazing,
So began the alliance between the Golden Horde and Mamluks, and while it never resulted in any military cooperation, it did keep access to Kipchak slaves open for the Mamluk army, despite some periods of cooler relations. Additionally, it unbalanced the Ilkhanate, which always feared a joint attack by the Mamluks and Golden Horde, a threat the Mamluks always encouraged. Preventing the Ilkhanate from massing all of its considerable strength on the Mamluks served Baybars' defenses all the better. While Mamluk sources like to present this as a relationship of equal partners, with the Mamluk Sultan in a role as guardian of Islam and the religious senior, it's speculated that the Golden Horde saw this as a submission of the Mamluks to them. The Golden Horde Khans, as rulers of the Kipchak steppe and its peoples, may have seen it natural for the Kipchaks in Egypt to submit to them, made all the easier by their shared religion. For in Mongol imperial ideology, only the Chinggisids were legitimate rulers. Further, Mamluk embassies always bore a great number of expensive gifts for the Khan, while the Golden Horde
I guess it still kind of works for him in a sense, Baybars. It works for him still, but yeah, they're thinking probably, this dude's submitting to us, which is hilarious,
Delhi sent gifts in return, as it may have seen this as tribute. This is not just a modern observation. A later Mamluk scholar, Alaini, complained of how uneven the relationship was, and believed the Golden Horde had the better of it. By the time of his death in 1277, Baybars had created a system designed to negate Mongol military prowess. A strong army, well versed in Mongol attacks, was one thing, but in addition to this offensive weapon, Baybars had effectively prepared a lengthy defensive network too, while diplomatically preventing the Ilkhanate from focusing solely on the Mamluks militarily. And it is a testament to its ability that only on a single occasion did it fail, in 1300, when the Ilkhan Ghazan overcame the boy Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad at Wadi al-Khazandar. As a result, the Mamluks outlived the Ilkhanate by almost 2 centuries.
Wow. Dang. Alright guys, so that's the end of that part. Tomorrow we'll be covering about how China defended against the Mongols. And yeah, I'll see you guys then.